So there were a number of challenges, small to medium-sized stages. They're not using in-ears. They use 6 wedges. The band can get really, really loud, but they also play with dynamics. So, you know, they all play at reasonable levels. When they get loud, everybody gets loud together. They're basically kind of mixing themselves. Since they weren't touring with their own sound tech, you never knew from, you know, night to night who was going to be mixing. Nate and Sput, they have really good ears, and they know what they want to hear. And I felt like if we empowered them to get the sounds that made them happy, it would make the audience happy too. And it turns out that's exactly what happened.
A little more volume.
Okay. For kick, we're using the SR20LS. The SR20LS and the DM20s, they have the same exact sound, same capsule, same electronics, same frequency response, same polar response. The only difference is the form factor. So we find that we get the best sound if we have the microphone pointed basically at the spot where the beater hits the drum, but back a little bit, closer to the rim here. So for overheads, we're using just a single SR25 right here on a boom, and we've got it positioned a little closer to the ride. With such a wide cardioid though, we're able to capture the sound of the entire kit. It's no problem at all. We were equipping Sput and Nate to basically get the sounds that they wanted at the source before anybody touched an EQ, control, or compressor. For hi-hat, we're doing a single SR25, just like the overheads. And it turns out that in these guys' setup, the hi-hat is loud enough usually to come through acoustically. We're actually using it mostly just to send to Nate's monitor so that he can hear the hi-hat. All right, so for bongos and conga, we're using the P30, the periscope, and their hypercardioid mics so that they're a little bit more narrow. We use a single one to capture the bongos, just a little higher than the conga ones. It's about maybe 5 or 6 inches above and in the middle. And for the high conga, we've got it kind of off to the side a little bit so it doesn't get in Nate's way. And it's about maybe 3 or 4 inches away from the head. For the low conga, we're basically mirroring that setup on the other side. And because we have these little goosenecks, what we're going to do during the sound check is take 30 seconds to fine-tune the positions of these microphones. What Nate often finds is that depending on the monitor setup, depending on where the mic is, he may want to flip the phase on one of these microphones. Okay, so for guitar amp, we are using a single SR25. It's the same mic that we use as overheads and hi-hat. And the position that we start off with is basically right here, almost directly on axis. And we found that on this guitar amp, moving just slightly over to the left, basically the edge of the dust cap, gave us the best sound. And it's been consistent over and over again, night after night. Now, depending on the amp, depending on the speaker, you might end up kind of going a little bit closer to on axis, or you might go a little bit further away. But these mics are really well behaved with guitar amps. One other thing, I'm not touching the grill cloth, but I'm really close. That proximity effect gives us some nice low end, but it's not boomy. So when you look at the drum mics, they have this gooseneck that lets you move the microphone. Like the drummer can actually move the microphone around to find the right sound. There were times when we're doing the sound check and Sput or Nate says, give me a little bit less attack on this thing or give me a bit more low end. And we made a conscious effort to say, okay, well, let's move the microphone around and find that spot first before we touch anything else. And every single time, we were able to find like a kick drum sound or a floor tom sound or a snare drum sound that was perfect. Or it was like 99% there. And then I could just do a tiny bit of EQ. The mix was basically just it was like a high pass only mix. I used EQ like on the kick drum like one time, and I actually didn't need to use any compression anywhere. So for the low snare, we'll choose the slot that's closest to the edge, And so this microphone has huge amount of rear rejection at 180 degrees. So what we're going to do is point this so that 180 is up at the cymbal. It's going to make a big difference. What we've found on Sput's kit is that we get the best sound when the capsule's up a little higher. So we rotate the microphone to get it into place, and then just bend the gooseneck a little bit. So for saxophone, we're using a DM20. It's the same mic that we use on snare and toms. It's nice and beefy. It has a gooseneck that allows you to get it into position really nicely. And because Jonathan uses a pedal board, we're actually going into this little Behringer Phantom power supply because it's a condenser microphone. And then we come out using an Earthworks level pad to bring the signal down. And then we're going into just a little transformer that goes from, it takes a balanced signal and unbalances it and changes the impedance, and that goes into his pedal. After that, out of the pedal, he goes into a DI box. It's amazing.
And the cup of water?
The cup of water is there in case this whole thing catches on fire. It gets the musician involved in finding the right sound, finding that sound that makes them happy. Turns out, like basically every single time, that the sound that made them happy was the sound that was the best out there in the house as well. My job was super easy.